Carry on.
Okay.
Ready?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think I'm going to open the meeting
that's
tonight
right.
because we have elections following the opening. So I would like to open the June 25th, 2012 regular meeting of the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission. Right now, I'd like to, we'll do Pledge of Allegiance. All rise. And now we'll do the roll call.
Commissioner Clower,
Here.
Commissioner Kloss,
Here.
Commissioner Marr, Commissioner Steels,
Here.
and Commissioner Shepard.
Here.
We have a quorum. Okay, we're going to start with the election of the commission chair. I will first ask for nominations for the chair and then proceed in the order the nominations were received for a second and a vote. Do we have any nominations for chair?
Yes, I nominate John Claus.
Commissioner Marr nominates John Kloss. Anybody else?
I nominate Gail Clower.
Other nominations? Okay. So I will ask for a second for John Kloss. Hearing no second, the nomination dies. Do we have a second for Commissioner Clower?
I second.
Second
I
by
seconded.
Mr. Kloss. All in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Okay. So that means we have 3 ayes and a second. Motion passes. Gail Clower is the commission chair.
So now do I take over or
You can take over for vice chair.
we're opening nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Denise Seals.
Any other nominations?
I second.
John. And the vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Looks like the motion passes.
Okay, now we have some interesting presentations. Oh, presentations by the public that are not on the agenda, but under the purview of the commission. Do we have any tonight? Consideration and approval of the minutes from the March 26th meeting. Any changes? I call for an approval? A motion to approve?
I so move.
And
I second.
motion carries? Or do we have to vote on that? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, proposed art for Garden Park by Smart Growth Investors. Stephen Jaycox? Good morning, or evening.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Can you hear me all right?
It's Monday.
My name is Stephen Jaycox. I work with Fulcrum Property in Sacramento. We are working on the Bridge District project, and if you've been out there lately, you will have noticed that there's a park growing from the Bridge District, and that is the location of the art project that we wanted to talk with you about this evening. So, let me see if I get the direction right here. Okay. So Garden Park. Garden Park, it was always imagined from the outset that Garden Park would have art in it. And if you see the illustration before you, you'll notice that in the center and on the two sides, the park is zoned for, we call them prompts, suggestive of certain activities. The center of the park is, in many ways, the most important, I think, conceptually to the Bridge District overall, which aims to put forward a vision for the Bridge District in West Sacramento as being a place where healthy outdoor living is not only accommodated, but it was designed to achieve and maximize. And here in this particular instance, we have a 16-foot Sierra granite table surrounded by 4 ancient olive trees. On the left of the image, you see toward the end cap there a series of raised planters that are difficult to discern and plan naturally, but the idea of those planters are that when the park goes in at first, there will be a selection of edibles and flowering plants. Eventually, when people live in the neighborhood, we're hopeful that people will take it over and turn it into a garden that the community shares. On the right, on the other end of the park, you see a pad with an area with a semicircular, a sort of a C-shaped element, which at the time that this illustration was made was just meant to sort of be a signifier for someday a great piece of art will go here. So three different programs, ideas for a garden park. Now this happened late last year, and what's going on here is that the 4 ancient olive trees around Garden Park are being installed. The tree that you see hanging by a crane is a 21,000-pound tree. And so one of the things that you recognize from this view, because this is a view looking westward, is that this is a park, because it's longer than it is wide, that's really about sight lines and vanishing points. It sort of orients the view in one particular direction, and that is this happens to be facing toward West Sacramento, but the other side, it faces toward the river to make that connection more explicit. And here is a photograph of the community table being installed. I'm showing you these pictures to give you an idea of the progress that's been made in the last half a year, and also to give you an idea of some of the qualities and characteristics of the park. Now this is a more recent picture. This is after the pavers have been installed, and you see the table sort of pointing in a direction toward the riverfront. You see the stand of trees that are distant there. Those are trees that are actually on the riverbank of the Sacramento River. And somewhere just over that grassy lawn, we'll one day want to see a piece of art, to sort of like be in our field of view as we look out that way toward the river. Right about where that yellow box is. So as you saw in the earlier plan, the location of the art has been, long contemplated. One of the things that became more obvious to us as we, began thinking about not only the park as a space and the connection to the riverfront, but we began to be tempted by the idea that, as this area that's along the red line, that there is a rather beautiful notion that if the area that is over that sort of stretch of land between Riverfront Street and the waterfront could be so developed such that when you're in Garden Park, that you can have this sight line to the river that seems like uninterrupted, sort of public space, green space. And similarly, from the riverfront looking back, that this is like a long reach into the middle of the neighborhood. It's all about connected space. Well, a lot of the questions that we have about how, since Garden Park is something that was designed and is almost completed and being realized, the next question is what is this space out here where the second dot is closer to the riverfront? What is the characteristic of that space, and how does it tie it all together? that dot that's closest to the riverfront is, what we call a Riverwalk node. And so, going back to the title page of, this whole presentation, it was a question of an art proposal for both Garden Park and the Riverwalk node. The thinking is that art could be one of those things that binds these spaces together. I think this is an illustration that's going to take a minute to load. There we go. Okay. And so this is maybe a less interesting way of looking at things, but what you have is the first illustration I showed you of the Garden Park on the left, and on the right, sort of line drawing that shows all the invisible lines that crisscross, that nice stretch of land out there next to the river. In the shaded area, that's kind of a parallelogram that's intersected with the triangle there at one end, Riverwalk node. We've shaded an area that we think, is possibly the other place where an art piece, a related art piece, could go. And so, beyond just, the landscaping, beyond just the materials and qualities of the surfaces and the site furnishings and things like that, we're hoping that there's an opportunity to bring two art pieces together that have a kind of conversation with one another. So, in that way, going back to our earlier diagram, we have the near field piece and the far field piece. I'm not sure exactly if, when this is all realized, that there's a constant, direct, and uninterrupted line of sight between the two things. But what would be nice is, since this is one of the processions, one of the ways that people will sort of navigate a path through the Bridge District, that they'll come across these two pieces of art as kind of markers, establishing the relationship between these two spaces and the importance of them as they tell the story about what the Bridge District is overall. And so while we were asking this question, and the question was, how could we not just find great art, but also find art that has a strong connection to Northern California? An opportunity presented itself. And I wanted to stop and sort of focus on this question for a moment, because Northern California is an important thing to consider, I think. I'm relatively new to this area. I came to Sacramento just a little bit more than 2 years ago, a little bit better than 2 years ago. And I have to tell you that the one conversation I've heard this community having constantly, the whole community from Davis to Roseville, is what is Sacramento? Who are we? And I've also seen a lot of positive movement toward, people starting to tease out answers to that question. Everything from, the new magazine, California Northern, to the great progress that's being made around, making our agricultural heritage visible through farmers markets and the traffic that's going there. But that's an interesting question. Who are we as Northern Californians? And could the selection of art somehow play into offering us a glimpse of at least one facet of how that question can be answered? So this is the opportunity that arose. This is Jun Kaneko. Jun Kaneko is a ceramic artist. Jun Kaneko came from Japan. Came from Japan in 1963. He was born in Nagoya in 1942. When he arrived to California, he came to the United States expressly to study art. Although when he came here, he thought he was going to study to be a painter. When he arrived, he sort of found himself in the middle of this sort of what is now considered the contemporary ceramics movement that was happening all, from Los Angeles all the way up here into the Bay Area in Northern California. And he studied with these people who are really important, that feature prominently in the collection of the Crocker Art Museum: Jerry Rothman, Peter Volkos, Paul Soldner. And what he realized was that ceramics is a really rich, dimensional place for him to work. And so he started working in ceramics, but his contribution to it, his sort of epiphany, was that he was going to make ceramics, but then he was going to paint on them. Well, it secured him a place in the art-making world. now today, Jun Kaneko's works are featured in over 58 art museums internationally. I just threw a smattering of the ones that are in Japan here because that's where he's from, but he's collected all over the world, Greece, Europe, etc. But you can see that these, aren't, minor collections. We're talking here about the Smithsonian Institution, the Victoria and Albert Museum in the UK, not to mention some very strong museums in different cities around the West and Midwest and also the East. In our own neck of the woods, the DeYoung Museum, the Oakland Museum of California, moving a bit east, Phoenix Museum, to the northwest, Portland. And what you'll notice from this list is that these are all really well-known and very well-respected institutions. They don't just accession works of art on a lark. During that time as well, Mr. Kaneko's completed over 35 public art commissions where he was asked by a commissioning agent, be it a university or an international airport or a private development, to create a work for a specific site. And this experience is important and relevant to us when we think about art selections for Garden Park, mainly because Jun Kaneko's work is ceramic. Its material qualities are such that it's ideally suited for being outdoor. It's hardy, resilient to the elements, and we'll get into some more of that later. But the point being is that when we consider the application that we're talking about here in West Sacramento for his work, it's important to point out and acknowledge that it's proven that it works. So there was a project that Jun Kaneko did in the early to mid-90s that was a very important project. He was invited to Mission Clay Products in Fremont, California, to make use of their kilns, their giant kilns, where their main business was to create sewer pipe. And so what they needed to do was take the clay of Northern California, harden it into materials that then could sort of service our infrastructure needs as Northern California grew. Jun Kaneko was invited there to make use of these enormous facilities and their capacity for moving big pieces around. And this was an opportunity he readily accepted. His concept, when he started working in this vernacular of pieces, and the opportunity that working at this particular site allowed him, was to increase the scale of what it was that he produced. So he started with this idea of, sort of a notion he had about these things on the right, which are called dangos. They're basically rice balls, so they're rice that's sort of kneaded into a plastic form. Plastic meaning that you can shape it any way you'd like. But what was interesting about the form was that not only could you have a certain range of shaping it without it being disassociated with the source of inspiration, but it also at the same time made a rather useful and interesting connection to agriculture that interested Kaneko. So this is a view inside of one of the workspaces and in Fremont, where Kaneko is working on building up these massive ceramic pieces that he called dangos from the ground up, starting with the base and building them out of slabs of clay that were on average about 4 or 5 inches thick. I think this skipped one, yeah. So, this is something obviously that as he built up the height, I think that there were basically 3 different sizes of dangos that he produced in Fremont. One set were 5 feet tall, one set were 8 feet tall, and another set were in the 10 to 11 foot tall range. In fact, some of the biggest ceramic works ever created by an artist. Okay. So here he is, because they are so big, what you'll notice is that he's actually constructing them in the kiln itself. Because, in being an unsettled state, before firing, they couldn't possibly be formed and then moved. So he created them in place in these section slabs that were then healed together with his own hands. And then, remember, what he was famous for was making these ceramic pieces and then painting on them. And there's a whole range of sort of different expressions that we'll see as an outcome, but here's the moment of truth. Here's the moment when these dangos are submitted to several days of high temperature firing. We're talking temperatures above 2,000 degrees for days on end. And the result is this. And now that they can be moved, they are. And here's a range of them. You can see it's difficult to discern really because of how they're arranged spatially, but the ones on the left are the smaller ones. The ones on the right are generally the 8-foot ones. I don't see any of the 11-foot ones in view here. And there they are. So the opportunity is this opportunity. 2 dangos. One of them is this beautiful sort of patina-like finish of the dripping paint down the face of the dango. The other one is a rather geometricized, sort of field-like pattern, basket weave almost. Now, keep these 2 in your mind for a moment, and then I'm going to go backwards in the slide presentation, if it will let me. And you can see them. So where the man is standing, directly above his head, there's a white one. We'll go 1 click, 1 dango to the right. That's A. And then you can see the other one because the patterning is so bold and interesting. So there they are, just after they were created. Our thought for these 2 pieces, this is the one that takes a minute to come up, is to put dango A in Garden Park and dango B somewhere in this shaded area out here close to the river. The reason being is, sort of the scale of the space relative to the sort of fineness of the texture and surface, graphics, if you will, of the dangos themselves. The one on the left sort of is better suited to a more intimate environment. The one on the right is a bit more graphic, so you can sort of identify it from a longer sight line. The 2 of them, being a form that resembles each other, really makes a nice connection. Really brings these 2 spaces perceptually closer together. And so here's a silly little photo montage that we did in our office real quick to give you an idea of what the scale of dango A in Garden Park would be like, with buildings sort of roughly behind it in that context. And you can kind of see just on the other side of the sort of the olive tree branch that is drooping down. You can kind of see that little patch of field grass out there. That's the sight line, to the river front there. That's still maintained because, buildings will never block that view. So we talked with the Crocker Art Museum about this to hear what they had to say, what they thought of it. And because we wanted, when we came before you this evening, we wanted to make sure that we had someone else's opinion that this was important work, not just something that we happen to like. And here Scott Shields, the Associate Director and the Chief Curator of the Crocker Art Museum, acknowledges in the second paragraph that Kaneko's one of America's premier ceramic artists and is internationally acclaimed for the rounded clay monoliths that he calls dangos. And in the third paragraph, he goes on to talk about how that the glazes are extraordinary. They range from drips to geometric shapes and form circles to interlocking stripes. The result's always crowd-pleasingly popular. I'm guessing that Mr. Shields knows something about the importance of putting art on display that is well-liked and well-regarded by the community. And that often these pieces become destinations in and of themselves and focal points of gathering places. So it sounds like we're on the right path. And finally, he offers his support in the last paragraph for, making a selection such as this, because what it does is it sort of creates some symmetry on the other side of the river between the quality of what we have at the Crocker Art Museum as far as art goes and what we might have over here in West Sacramento as far as art on public display. So Kaneka elsewhere. Now this is the point where I just wanted to run through this with you, a couple images of his installations elsewhere, because so far you've just seen these particular dangos being made and our proposal for where they're sited. This is a piece that was put on display by the public parks, New York City Public Parks. This is in Kansas City. This is at the City Hall in Philadelphia. What's great about these pieces is that they are the glazing, they're subject to these 2,000 degree temperatures during the firing process. The end result is that you get something that is really similar to ceramic tile in terms of the hardness of its finish. There's all sorts of statistics here that talk about the hardiness of the material, saying, for example, that this particular process and the dangos in particular were subjected to an industrial standard for freezing and thawing, meaning that they were submerged for 2 hours in boiling water and refrozen to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit and so on for 72 consecutive times. So they'll last. And also that, because of the thickness of the wall of the dangos being 4 and 5 inches thick, that the average stress tests on a 3/4 inch thickness of the ceramic wall is 9,580 pounds per square inch. So obviously increasing the width will make that even stronger. In summary, in terms of the strength and the suitability for these things out in the public space, there's washable ceramic tile, and they're stronger than brick. And this is one of the more recent installations. This is in front of the San Francisco Opera, where he designed the sets also for the latest performance of the Magic Flute. So it's a nice connection between that and that. So making connections, that's what we hope to do with the selection of these pieces. When we look at this as a sort of bird's eye view of what this does with the Bridge District development coming in on the west side of the river, the built urban structure of Sacramento on the east side, we see the Crocker Art Museum in pink. We see Old Town Sacramento in the sort of gold color. We see the ballpark. We see Garden Park and the riverfront development here. What this all does in total is it helps us, the whole community, Sacramento at large, to reframe, the river as being the center of town. And already the investment and the quality of thinking that's gone into preparing the Bridge District as a new urban place that puts the values that we have in the 21st century and packs them into a neighborhood offers quite a lot. But boy, artwork of this caliber really seals the deal. So here are the two pieces again. And at this I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you have.
Would you like to ask a question? No, I was just going to call for the questions.
did you choose them? I'm just curious. Was it you or?
Well, since we knew that artwork was going to, be something, a need that we would need to satisfy in Garden Park, we've been looking at a lot of options, and this one just sort of came to us. It's funny because the history of these pieces, that they were, made in Fremont. What happened was they were sold into a private collection in Portland, Oregon. The intention was that this was a large and prominent collector in Portland, and the family wanted to make a private art museum. And these were purchased to sort of be in their mind at that time because there wasn't any architectural plan, but these were going to be like the Civic Plaza kind of art pieces. However, there was a death in the family, and those plans didn't go forward because after the death in the family, the rest of the family didn't agree that that's how they wanted to spend the wealth that the family had accumulated. And so, because of the connections that my boss and his family have in the art community, they sort of found their way to us. And Mark Friedman, the president of our company, saw this as an amazing opportunity to repatriate these pieces to California because they belong here. And so that's how we found them. They found us.
I just want to mention this to you because you did not mention it at all, but I'm familiar with this type of work and Peter Vokas. This is ceramics when it's raised. See, ceramics was known as a craft when he first started in the 60s. Peter Vokas changed the concept of what ceramic is by making it into fine art, simply by smashing a couple of ceramic plates together. So what Kaneko did was, on a grand scale, which ceramics is not done in this manner, raise it to the level of the fine arts, which is very important in how the art wheel works and progress in the future. So what you have done, actually, you brought history into West Sacramento that's greater than what they have in Sacramento at the moment.
Yeah.
He's second generation, Kaneko. Peter Vokas is first generation. And I cannot believe you got it for us, for our city.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
No, we're very excited. It's not only a great story, that connects us to our history, but they're great works. Great works.
Is this the extent of the developer's obligation to create art? There's quite a vast development going in, and looks to me the park is about the width of a street, and it has concrete structures, and so it. I know it's not our mission to go into that, but it doesn't really look like a park, and it may not ever be a garden for community. So. So this is this the obligation that you have, is to put in the two rather nice pieces of artwork? Is there more to come?
Hi, I'm Katie Jacobson. I'm a senior project manager with the Community Development Department. I'm also the project manager for the Bridge District and was the lead city staffer in terms of our overall architectural guidelines and our specific plan for that area of town, as well as the scope of work that we define as the 2014 plan, which is the past years of construction. But as part of our process with the specific plan updates, we put a lot of requirements for public art and civic amenities throughout the Bridge District, and the specific plan does have a lot of detail on how that's to be financed and what all of the property owners' obligations are, as well as the city obligations for basically mixing resources and being as creative as possible. Some of the streets are called out in particular as requiring public art and or civic amenities, which could be fountains or special lighting, things like that. So this is just one of the property owners and developers.
But the intention, Katie, is that the city's portion, or actually it's not really even, it's not the city, needs to be approved by council, but it's funding from an assessment district that the developers created.
Exactly. So the CFD formation document, so the CFD 27 was formed by the property owners, and $11 million of bond proceeds were raised, and that's part of what financed the Bridge District improvements. There's another $40 million of other types of funding involved, but the CFD formation documents require that both the property owners and the city both agree on an investment. So I will take your feedback and I'll take it into council, and then they'll have to approve that this investment is made as well.
These pieces are stunning. I mean, really, really stunning. And quite a feather in the cap.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really beautiful. So I would move that we, that this commission recommend that the CFD 27 funds project.
And I second that.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope, motion carries.
Can't believe you found these pieces. It's
Thank you
just
so very
really
much.
awesome.
Thank you so
Look
much.
forward to bringing them here.
Thank you.
Do we have any kind of a time frame on when those are going to come in?
Well, the park itself is substantially complete. It hasn't been delivered to the city quite yet, and there's a warranty period. We actually have a lot of time to work with because it's going to be some months, in fact, before the park is open to the public. Months, meaning possibly in excess of 12. So we're not in a real hurry to. I would think that once they're approved, we'd be in a hurry to sort of get the arrangements made and get them on their way here. I would imagine that we would wait to install them until just before the park opened.
And then maintenance, graffiti mitigation, those kinds of things, is that funded through the same assessment? How does that get paid?
The development agreements that have been executed by the three development agreements obligate the property owners to form a maintenance district. So there's still some general fund obligation to help support some of the maintenance in the bridge districts the way it does in the rest of the city. But that maintenance district hasn't been formed yet. So the city essentially will own and maintain and be responsible for those pieces once they're installed. And I did want to add that the city is bridge housing, which will be the first housing project coming out of the ground. That's breaking ground in October. And then I think Fulcrum's townhomes hopefully will be within that next year. So the idea is we want as much eyes on this art as possible.
Absolutely.
And
That
so
was
we
a
have
question. Yeah.
we have to time it, in light of that.
Thank you, Katie.
Could you clarify one other thing?
Yes.
The portion of this visual concept that is closest to the river where the other piece is going, how much time evolves in between the actual park and that?
Well,
You
as
hopefully.
Probably going together.
Yeah, as Katie mentioned, we're hoping to break ground on the townhomes in March of 2013. About that time, we'll be sort of underway with the development of that space in between.
Okay.
So we're hoping that in the calendar year of 2013, we'll be able to place the other dango on its site out there, because ultimately it's in the city's best interest and the private developer's best interest to establish patterns of traffic across the bridge district so that people know what it is, know what it offers, understand what it's going to be, and we'll want to get these pieces and parts into place as soon as possible.
Has there been any discussion as to how they're going to be mounted? As I noticed in the various pictures that you have on here, they're on various. Some of them are on blocks, some are on cement, some are on table-like structures.
Well, we don't have any sort of notions about that. Once the pieces are secured, we'll contact Kaneko's studio and ask them what Mr. Kaneko's preference is for how they'll be cited exactly. Being the artist, we want to give him the courtesy of having some input into that. But of all the installations we've seen, there's really two types: a pedestal of some kind, or being anchored directly to the ground. And both options, the fastening and the anchoring of the pieces seem to be able to be accomplished by either. So whichever he prefers, I would say.
Thank
Very
you.
exciting stuff. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sculpture Park Proposal Presentation by Danny Thomas, Director of YOLO Arts. Hi, Danny. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Gail. Madam Chair, Commissioners, and staff, thank you very much for the opportunity to present a concept that we've been working on in collaboration with city staff. So we're going to start with a brief PowerPoint to kind of run you through some information. I do want to just outline for those of you who don't know about my organization, we are the countywide public benefit, aka nonprofit arts organization that serves the county, serves the communities and the residents of the county. We do that in 4 distinctive areas. One is art education. We serve just over 2,600 children in the county, including in West Sacramento. We also provide technical assistance for artists, workshops, our artist directory, which is on our website at yoloarts.org. We administer a nationally recognized project called the Art and Ag Project. And this year we were very pleased to be recognized by ArtPlace, which is a national consortium of foundations for weaving art into the economy of Yolo County. And that recognition came with funding, which is even better. And then last but not least, certainly, we also administer public art. We have since 1993 been the art consultant, the lead art consultant for the County of Yolo. We have branched out and are serving a number of for-profit developers and working on public art, and we work with a couple of cities around the county and just being advisory on their public art. So Bob Johnston and Michelle and Scott Stanley are also people that we've been working with in collaboration for a number of years. So without further ado, I'd like to start in on this concept, which we are calling, pardon me, now I need glasses, the Rotating Sculpture Gallery for the West Sacramento River Walk. This project is a, we'll start with our slideshow, and next slide, oh, here it is. Sorry, I'm a left-handed girl. So this project is really a collaborative project. It started was actually inspired by 4 local artists who then came to YOLO Arts and wanted to partner with us to pull this project together. We, in partnership, came and presented it to city staff. And it is really an exciting project for your Riverwalk area and for West Sacramento, and is actually based on a real strong proven model of success. And we'll go into more detail about that for you so you can have all the information. You have in front of you a card that is the beginnings of the sculpture team. I do have to apologize to artist Paula Wetzel-Belisera. For some reason, my printer cut her off on the back end, so we'll reprint those for you. But this is the beginnings of a really strong collaboration and a really great project for West Sacramento. So I'd like to proceed by introducing the team, which is Gar, Roy, Joseph, and Paula Wetzel-Belisera. Gentlemen, ladies.
Hello, my name is Gar Ugaldi. This is the team that I kind of put together. A few months back, I was in San Diego. My father was passing away, and I ended up hanging out down at the harbor a lot. And they had just a a wonderful sculpture gallery or park along the harbor there. And that's how I was always thinking of why couldn't Sacramento have something like this? And I have a studio in Sacramento, so that's where my studio is right now. I'm in Midtown. I have a warehouse space there. And what happened was after I came back from San Diego, I was listening to a radio show with Christopher Cabaldon on it. He was talking about the Bridge District and the Arts District that's just there in development. And this is how it started turning the wheels in my head about this. And so I started talking to a friend of mine, Roy Tapman, who's an artist, sculptor, and landscape architect as well. And we ended up bringing Joe Balacera and Paula in on the project, and that's how it sort of came to be. And then we connected with Danny Thomas. And so I guess after, where's the little, I guess the next one? Oh, you took it. Okay. So next, you already went to this. Okay. Okay, what's an outdoor sculpture park? It's a designated community space that it's along the Riverwalk, which is actually the previous presentation kind of spelled out right in that same area, right along the river is where I was thinking, and the team was, about to create a sculpture gallery, an outdoor sculpture park. And we have a series of pedestals or platforms we placed along that Riverwalk in a series of that stretches down the whole from near the baseball park all the way down to the walk as it goes, I guess, southward. And we would be displaying, or initially we would want to bring in regional artists, Yolo County artists, and have a rotating park there. So every 2 years, we're suggesting that every 2 years or so we would rotate out the art on these pedestals that are stretched along the Riverwalk. And that could bring in a yearly festival as the art would be rotated out, staggered, so that's not all taken out at once, but just sort of, certain artworks would go out, new ones would come in, and all the artwork would be for sale, and that artwork would the percentage of the sales would go into the county or into the city and into Yolo Arts, and that would sort of perpetuate the program, and then also would help with maintenance and maintaining the program. So I'm going to turn this, and then, the next one, we'll go to other cities that have successful existing programs: San Diego, Pasadena, Palm Desert, Santa Cruz, Napa, and a real big one is in Loveland, Colorado, and they have a huge festival every year, and they bring in hundreds of artisans and artists, and it's one big kind of a party to celebrate the new work that's coming in, and they stagger it out as well. They don't just take everything out, because I'm not quite sure exactly how many art pieces there are there, but they rotate a portion of them out, and it's a big celebration, and it brings in lots of revenue for the city and a lot of clout for the artists involved, and it's quite a program. And here's just you can see the tents here on that, and like I said, it just brings in a lot of people. And I'll turn this over now to Roy Tapman. He's going to take over the next section.
Gar, are you a West Sac resident, Gar?
I'm sorry?
Do you live in West Sacramento?
No, I'm in Sacramento.
I know you said your studio was there.
Yes, no, I'm in.
So of your team of four, the Balceras.
The Beliceras, they are the West Sacramento
Okay,
connection,
great.
So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Hi, I'm Roy Tapman, and I'm going to discuss a little bit about the current view along the river, which, as we all know, it's a beautiful space, and right now the Riverwalk contains both educational and historic informational markers, along with the natural beauty and panoramic views. And the bridge, as was mentioned earlier, ties both West Sacramento to Sacramento proper, which creates a bigger neighborhood than just West Sacramento or just Sacramento. Excuse me. And the Riverwalk also creates healthy activities, which include running, walking, biking, along with meeting places and a stage venue where they show music or movies and music, food and other activities happen there. And we feel that this rotating sculpture gallery along the Riverwalk would only enhance that experience for not only the existing community here, but people that come and visit. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Bellicera, and Paul and I have been living in West Sacramento for the past 10 years and really enjoying living here. You may be familiar with a piece of sculpture I have in front of the library, so I mostly do public art these days. So I'm going to talk about let's see, this way. Okay, Roy, I think that was supposed to be part of your... These are just some panoramic views, which you should probably all be familiar with. And so this is the environment we were at first envisioning working in. So what does this mean for West Sacramento? Well, the art, of course, will change the landscape and continuously change it as the artwork is changed out. It'll enhance the outdoors for the residents here, and of course be a marketable product for tourism. And as Roy was talking about, the potential for expansion of events and festivals, be an educational venue for students, and as art should do, enhance the public pride, interest, and community value. Launching the sculpture at Riverwalk. For now, we're calling ourselves the Sculpture at Riverwalk West Sacramento team. We would like to create the first 4 inaugural sculptures, and we would continue working with the city of West Sacramento on the design and placement of the sculpture pads, and we would be committed to further development of this project. I put together, photoshopped some views, some imaginary views of the artwork in the area, just to get a flavor of what art on the Riverwalk might look like, using artwork from all of us. It's Paula's turn.
I'm going to go back one because oops, the wrong direction. I wanted to tell you that I'm thrilled to be on this side of your bench because I was a commissioner at the very beginning and really enjoy seeing how West Sacramento has grown and how we're bringing in just nationally acclaimed artists like June Kaneko. And I enjoyed listening to that prior presentation because it's given me kind of more of a perspective of like the timeline and what the development's going to be along the Riverwalk. And as Gar indicated, initially we were thinking that we wanted to bring some art and excitement in addition to the beautiful surroundings of the Riverwalk, kind of create a park-like environment. And you can see that ties in beautifully with the presentation that Stephen gave with the Kaneko sculpture and the garden park. So it kind of ties into that. It's broadening the art area and also in bringing in more regional artists, giving them an opportunity to change in and out of this particular venue, the temporary garden, the temporary gallery. So we initially thought right along this Riverwalk would be really the best area. Having talked to city staff, including Bob, the city would like to see the developed areas used in the first phase rather than putting art out on the on the Riverwalk itself, where the development hasn't come in. There's not really an infrastructure. You like to have the art where it's the highest impact, where more people would see it, be more engaged with it. And so the first phase would be to include some what we call pads or foundations for these temporary rotating sculptures around the stadium. At the entrance of the stadium and at the back end of the stadium on the street in the back would be the first areas that would be developed. Here's the overview. You can see the stadium. The red dots indicate the first areas that we would like to see pads put in along the entry 5th Street into the stadium and the Ballpark Drive and Riverfront where it meets. There's going to be a lot of activity over there with parking and people moving about, and also that entry D into the Riverwalk itself. So initially, that's the first phase. The second phase, when there's more properties developed along the Riverwalk, we'd like to put in more sculpture pads in conjunction with what is being developed. And then the third phase, we would just go beyond and expand as appropriate. And Gar also indicated that as this develops, other festivals can be brought in when the sculptures are changed out and have more of an arts venue, something that would really attract a lot of people to the region and make a name for West Sacramento in that sense. Now, going from the map, I'd like to show you some actual photographs that Joe has photoshopped in some sculpture imagery, so you could get an idea of what a 10-foot tall sculpture on a pad would look like in these various areas. We have Gar standing out there, life-size, with a 10-foot wooden pole, and then we have Joe's photoshopped in a sculpture, so you could get kind of an idea. This is just kind of a first look at some areas. This is that berm that's at the entry to the stadium. We talked about perhaps having a few sculptures up there and making a little access area up there that people could walk up. This is the area behind, what I call behind the stadium, and there's on this side of Riverfront and on the other side of Riverfront seems like a really good place for some sculptures. It has the iconic look with the backdrop of the bridge and of the stadium as well. This is another place along the entry to the Riverwalk from the ballpark, the southeast corner of Ballpark and Riverwalk. This is an alternate area that we thought was a little too busy. There's a little too much distraction, visual distraction, but this is a possibility too where there's a lot of traffic at the corner of Tower Gateway. Next steps.
We thought we'd rotate ourselves around a little bit so you can get a feel for all of us on the team. And part of what we're excited about this concept is, as you can tell, we're just in the preliminary stages in having the conversation. But the excitement part is the engaging pieces that can play off of this once this park is in full swing. The fact that you want to think about it as your outdoor gallery, and it rotates. So if you're changing workout every 2 years, you have something to celebrate, as you go along. You then create an RFQ, an RFP, and these calls can go out on a number of levels. That's part of the way that we would work with you all, and I know Scott certainly knows how to put an RFP out, Scott Stanley, but certainly we can help get the word out on a regional level and on a national level. I just returned from a conference in San Antonio, Texas on public art. It's the Americans for the Arts Conference. It's the second time I've been able to go to this conference. Thank you to my board. And this is part of what they do with this conference is take people out on tours of their public art in both San Diego and San Antonio. So it gives you a reason when people come to town. It gives you a tourist option. And I Googled really quickly. The Loveland Festival, which happens, I believe, in the spring, has over 10,000 people visiting Loveland. And Loveland, if you don't know where the community of Loveland is like, it's a relatively small rural community in the northwest of Colorado. And it's surrounded by richer cities, if you will, Aspen, Keystone. There's a lot of high areas that are big art fans, and it's really become a regional, local appeal as well as a national appeal. So what we've outlined in front of you here is what we feel would be the next steps should you all agree this is a worthwhile project to continue forward with. And that is really we need to identify what the infrastructure looks like, how many pads, what the costs look like. This group of artists, which you saw just a snippet at the front end of their images, and it's on their card. These 4 artists have agreed to create sculptures to be the inaugural art pieces that would go on display. Potentially establishing a steering committee or at least a working committee where we could outline the goals of the project and also create a marketing plan. Once these are up, along with your other 2 pieces that we saw earlier, it's worth celebrating and inviting people into West Sacramento. One of the things we also talked about was determining sources of funding. Certainly developers are one of the ways we can look to funding, but corporate sponsors. There's also funding that was identified when I was down in San Antonio that is specifically designed for projects like this. A lot of the conversations that are being had on the national level is the phrase creative placemaking, and that essentially what that means is creating an identity for your community through art, and then working to celebrate that and drawing people into your community. We have on staff, well, she's not on staff, we have under contract a couple of grant, we don't have anybody really on staff, but we have a couple of grant writers that we work with that can work with us to identify grant funding that could also help support this project, along with really creating a real marketable fund development campaign. That would be year 1. Whoops, I went the wrong way. And then, you know, really finding the placements, applying for grants, creating the artist application. These are all just little tertiary steps that need to get you to that next level of really designing and unveiling and celebrating, and then creating tourism features. It could be an art and music festival. There's lots of different ways you can design it. So without further ado, what we wanted to do next is just really thank you for the opportunity to present it and open it up for questions, because you may have a few. Thank you again.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, actually, yeah, I do. Actually, I'm very concerned. I think it's a great idea, but I have a lot of concerns about what you want to do. And it's just like, I believe the city should have some control over what is shown, because we're not talking about a festival that lasts maybe, 1 week, 2 weeks. You're talking about something that goes on, having these artwork for the entire year. And it's the image of the city that we are talking about, and that's my concern. That there should be someone from the city that can,
if I may,
that can,
if I may, I think that the answer to that is that this would certainly be something that this commission would be a big part of, or could be, or you could, I don't want to speak out of turn, but maybe there's a subcommittee of this commission that works with us on this. Because when you create a call for art, you define what you want your art to look like. I mean, not totally, but you're going to give them language that helps guide an artist. And then certainly it would be what we do when we do public art, and I know that you guys probably do the same thing, and that is that once those submissions come into play, then there's a presentation and a review process where you look at the different pieces of public art that may be, and you select them. You don't have to take anything just because someone comes in the door. This is, it's very similar to a gallery. You look at all the work, and then you pick what works for your gallery. So I totally agree with you. I concur.
I'm very excited. I was more hopeful that'd be a permanent collection instead of a rotating one, where we can get the best from each artist that you may select. And that would be like very, very good for the kids in this area, where they can go to repeatedly and grow up with this work and perhaps be inspired to become artists through it.
That's in some of the cities like outside of Portland, I think it's Lake Oswego. They actually they have the same sort of rotating sculpture gallery or park, and then the public gets to choose like one or two pieces they want to permanently keep in the city with, and then those pieces they rotate somewhere in the city, and they have a committee, and like in Palm Desert, and actually in most of these, at least to my knowledge, most of these rotating sculpture parks, the artwork that they're reviewing are pieces that are already made. They've passed muster on structural, engineering. Everything it's not concept work. These are already existing pieces that will fit in on those pedestals that we will give them the parameters of, so, and they bring in people from the city, the parks, or arts, you're like a committee such as yourself that are included in the selection of the artwork. So it's not just, we weren't planning on just having like a little cabal over here and just like, oh, this is what we want. But that's sort of what that was our idea anyway. So, but I'll turn it over to Danny. Thanks.
I have a question. Sure. In your research, did you find that was the average time that the sculptures were 2 years? Because you have 6 or 7 cities here. Is that what they do? Is 2 years? Is that good?
2 years seem to be typical because it's a big endeavor to put this stuff up, and all the stuff there, and so and it might take a while for people to really embed it in their everyday world, and also I don't think we really talked about the idea so much as that this work would be for sale. And then there's you work out the program where it's got to be replaced. You have to have something right away on that pad.
The idea also is it is for sale, and that if you built into your program, such as Gar suggested, that the city gets to vote, and there's funding set aside that one of these pieces will stay in your collection, that would be, I think, that's one of the models that I think would really inspire artists to participate. If they know that, the price range, if they're, let's put a dollar figure on it, $10,000, and they know that by going through this, they're going to show 6 or 8 pieces, but one of them will stay and they'll have a sale. That's a really nice option.
Can I ask a couple questions? First, Danny, congratulations on YOLO Arts and the work that you're doing and your ability and success in really expanding into all of Yolo County. And so congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, and thank you on behalf of our community. And I'm so grateful that Katie J stayed, because I do have, she's probably going to be the institutional memory that's left for some of my questions. I do remember back at the turn of the century when the Riverwalk Park was opened, and it was intended at that point that there be sculpture along the park, and some of the points that you brought up related. It's an inspiring piece of property that heretofore hasn't really. It's inspiring to people on both sides of the river, less so for some reason to residents. There have been some challenges with the residents of West Sacramento taking advantage of Riverwalk Park. Certainly the businesses there enjoy it, and it is, we call it the beautiful side of the river. It's a beautiful view from Old Sac, but it is still West Sacramento, and So I do appreciate the recognition that that may not be the place to start. I remember a conversation with the former director of redevelopment back in the good old days when we had redevelopment, and we talked at length about the West Cap Streetscape plan. And it was intended as part of that plan, as I remember, but certainly part of that conversation, and I thought part of the original, part of the plan that was adopted by council, that there be a sculpture park or some kind of sculpture on West Cap. And so as we're looking at investing public art funds, I know that we have both funding and a park intended to be constructed at Sycamore in the very near future. And we've invested, the city has invested a lot of money in the Tower Bridge Gateway project and has that easement already. And I guess while on the one hand, it's a schizophrenic kind of feeling in that, boy, that bridge district, it's really exciting. It makes my heart ache a little tiny bit when we talk about focusing everything towards Sacramento, towards the river. And when we have, just for future presentations, we are a little sensitive about Sacramento, Sacramento Reed. I mean, we are Yolo County over here. And that's one of the reasons that we're so pleased to work with Yolo Arts. So a project that involves public money, like the art fund, the public art fund, that moves the focus from our recent public investment along West Cap, our future investment down towards Sycamore, and the continued community really focus of the last 2-3 decades, from longer than the city has been a city, of helping this community define and establish what is its city core, which was part of our inspiration for the public art in front of a library that we were pleased to participate in, and the public art in the building across the street, to help our community define, yes, here, this is your downtown. Yes, here, this is West Sacramento. This is the heart of your community. I'm just a little concerned about not only how residents might feel, but just if we're being counterproductive to our. I couldn't agree more with with a sculpture, a rotating sculpture exhibit like this, as a place creating tool. I'm just concerned about the placement, just to be really frank with you. That would be a big concern.
I try to agree with her. I agree with her.
I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm wondering what placement are you considering?
Well, I know that, and I'm not. I don't have I just remember historically, and Katie helped me out, but that the West Cap Streetscape program involved a sculpture garden, and we have invested, with the help of SACOG and some very clever funding, public funding, a lot of money on this street. And the intention is that it extend down, towards Harbor, that this is not just this block, that the vision is that it go down, certainly as far as West Acre or Pecan or Sycamore. So when we, not too long ago, council approved, and it seems like I remember conversations about how do we get some of the old neon? How do we, you remember that. How do we get some of the old neon? How do we collect this? How do we not let that, which may be funky but historical, because we're also the Historical Preservation Commission. How do we hold on to all that? And so I would just put out for discussion
This is the best place.
location, or for future discussion, location, and for Katie, help. Am I remembering this correctly?
I don't remember precisely that there was any. I don't remember plans showing a specific area, but we have when you build very wide frontage, the intent of that is it provides not only a pedestrian-friendly walkability feature, but it allows for civic amenities like public art, fountains, signs, special signs and monuments, sculpture, so.
There was a turnaround at this end. There was a turnaround
Yes.
envisioned, and it was at that turnaround that Val, that we talked extensively. He envisioned, or we had talked, and I don't know what was approved by council and what wasn't, but that there was, I know he said sculpture park, and I don't know what the intention was, but I just would have just to throw that out for future conversation.
We can certainly, I can go research that and send an email or send information to commission members about that so that you have better framework about that overall plan. Those were schematics, their design, their vision. I don't think anything was officially required or
Well, I
put in.
know that for us to get SACOG funding, did we not have to have a West Cap plan?
Yes, but the SACOG funding.
There is a West Cap plan.
Exactly. The SACOG
Yeah.
funding was based, ultimately would have been based on the specifications that we bid. So, but they also would have been, our selection would have been based on what is our overall vision, and which does include the extension of the amenities that you're talking about.
And so much of the challenge from a residential standpoint has been our ability to bridge, the water, the railroad tracks, some of the economic challenges that we've had in bringing our community together. And I know that Sycamore Park, there'd been conversation about maybe there being a bike and walk trail that goes, from Southport all the way up into the north part of town along. And I know that funding is already there. So I just throw it out for conversation.
We do have a grant for Sycamore Park. We are working on the
Yeah.
specifications for it. And certainly I'm sure they'll consider public art as part of that.
So just as we're looking at a placement, for this kind of a thing, I just would be reluctant to turn the community's back on itself. And I would, unfortunately, have some concerns about our ability to engage the residents, which is what we're charged to do.
Right, right. One thought about this, I don't know, you're talking about a long stretch to harbor. I think kind of the idea of a sculpture garden, sculpture gallery would be something that you could walk from one to another.
Right.
And kind of interact with the pieces and, enjoy them as you would be, and also maybe getting a little exercise, right? So that's something to think about, too.
Right, and so that's exactly what made me remember this, because the goal for West Capitol is that it be walkable and bikeable and along public transportation, which is why the transit center is right across the way. And Phase 2, Katie helped me down to Westlake, I know that it goes down. Yeah.
Maureen Pasca would address this much
We
better
should
than
hurry
I can. I've
then.
been so focused on the bridge district.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly I know that there's multiple phases, and I know that they are involved in design on the second phase of it, moving it. But
Right, so I know that the city has quite a bit of what had in the past been redevelopment property down there, and so I don't know, is all that easement ours in the River District? Is that all ours, the places that we were looking at?
in the slideshow.
Yeah.
There were a lot of areas where I realized it was a conceptual vision and PowerPoint, and I'm totally supporting that. But there were some areas that were private property because we have zero setback.
Right.
So essentially, that's part of our zoning is zero setback. So where they were showing pieces that were sort of away from
Yeah.
what was the right of way, those would all have to be negotiated. However, again, we have the very wide frontage, the very walkable features that do provide for installing features like that. But each one I would have to look at, and each one might involve a separate transaction or negotiation in terms of what property it was sitting on. And then in terms of the Riverwalk itself, the property owners own up to the edge of the public side of it, and so there would have to be a negotiation with them, or the pedestals would have to be on the waterward side.
Which is problematic. or can be very problematic from.
So, I mean,
we've got a lot of
these are all
agencies.
in the weeds practical
Yeah,
issues
exactly
that could
right.
all be worked out, but it's just that we would have to get into more detailed specifications.
I mean,
Yeah, the concept is fabulous.
awesome, really awesome. I just that in the next level, maybe in the next phase, kind of, schematic somewhere in there, the kind of geography placement might be part of that.
I have one more question. Are the ball player bronzes still being planned to be in front of the ballpark or
Somewhere at
on the
the
ballpark site?
Yes.
I assume.
Yeah, as far as I know, the plan is to move those at some point down the road. I've heard 5 years.
Okay, well, but that needs to be taken into consideration especially if they're talking about sculptures around the ballpark. The location of those would be pretty important to
Well, and the thing
know
that's kind
about.
of entertaining is, I don't know how many, if you just look at the design of what's happened to this point, it is actually really walkable, and there have been Facebook contests with folks having their pictures taken with those
Oh, yeah.
baseball players, and
They're very popular.
it's been very popular, so it's not completely inaccessible.
If I may, part of what I think we could do in this process is, certainly you've raised a number of really quality issues about your community and some of the planning that is there for sections, West Capitol, I heard you, and the bronze ball players. Part of what happens or should happen when you start taking a look at this project is doing an inventory, not only of your current collection but also of your desired locations. So that would be the next step. In really looking at this and really making a cohesive plan. Our first goal when we came to Bob was talking about the Riverwalk, but we had some pretty strong conversations about the making sure that is vandal free. Worrying about stretching it out too far down the way. We talked about the riverside being an issue because of, what's the name of that government agency? Somebody help me, that we have to go through.
There's about 8 of them
Thank
that
you.
have it.
Yeah, I think
There's, that just gives me a headache thinking about it. So, part of proceeding in this is really doing it thoughtfully and taking into consideration your inventories of your concepts, your master planning, as well as your current collection and your dream collection. That's part of what needs to talk, that's that conversation that needs to have, and then working to develop the infrastructure. And we were guided to this secondary section that we saw in phase 1. And certainly things can change based on placement, based on whether or not the city owns it or not. But all those things should come into consideration and really take careful planning. It also needs to start somewhere. And so there may be, we talked about phasings of this planning project, but your program could have a phasing concept. So you could start at the ballpark and the walk and then talk about the Riverwalk and talk about how it revolves into West Sac. And that's how you start creating your collection that really becomes iconic locations for tourism. And they may or may not be connected from a walkable piece, but I don't know if West Capitol actually has that walkability built in yet. I can't speak to the infrastructure.
Just as you leave, take a look out front,
Yeah.
and you'll notice very wide sidewalks. You'll notice very narrow streets. You'll notice, that it's definitely intended for biking, walking.
Okay.
That's how we were able to get the funding to do it.
So that's part of that planning process, and thinking about, having you all think about the phasing of this project. Because it can go on every if you think about it, every 2 years you're rotating pieces. If you've got enough money to collect a piece, you're now establishing your outdoor collection, and those pieces could go in any number of those locations on a permanent level. But it does require planning, and it does require partnership. So I guess part of what we're here to do is provide you with the inspiration, and then find out what our next steps may or may not be with city staff.
Actually, I want to mention, which just concerned me very much, is that you're afraid that the art, maybe sculpture, may be too fragile for West Capitol Avenue. But let me say this, sculpture should not be that fragile. If it is, it should not be displayed or shown.
No, I'm sorry, if I projected that concept, it's not about fragility, it's about vandalism. No matter how sturdy a piece can be, it can still be spray painted. That you still have, and no matter what you do, it still may happen. But we certainly wouldn't put anything. There would be specifications that would hold up, very similar to your first presentation. That there's a number of things there's a number of things we're going to check off on our list for outdoor public art, but you still have to consider long-term.
RFQ, yeah.
You just
Well,
have to consider
and
that.
Gar's point was well taken. In Lake Oswego, that whole community, I mean, there is an opinion about every piece. It may not be, at least they're looking and talking, which is part of the goal of public art. You just want to engage the community. So people carry on about those pieces as if, they paid for it out of their, well, they did pay for it.
Well,
Never
but
mind.
here's the interesting part. If you have a chance to go to San Diego and walk on the port, along the port and see their public art, it's a beautiful gallery. Those pieces don't necessarily have connection from one piece to the other. They're each individually inspiring. But you can walk the entire port side and just have a beautiful view, which was probably not very attractive to begin with. But they've made it so. If you go to San Antonio, there are 4 different tours you can take and be exhausted when you're done and love the public art. In Spain, in Valencia in Spain, they put out, in the middle of the hot of summer, they put out, they've purchased the infrastructure and put up huge lit panels and did an entire photography exhibition outdoors. And I know you guys already have a photo contest going on, annual photo contest. Well, we can revive it.
Yes.
Because this photo installation, it's on the Avenue of the Arts. Oh, no, it's not got the Avenue of the Arts. It's escaping me. But it's we walked it in 100-degree, 9 o'clock weather, p.m., and it's just absolutely stunning. And the fact that it was lit and people were there, it draws people to it. And that's, so it's as much for your residents as it is for your tourists.
I would like you to consider to put some of your sculptures, your group, in schools, like in the elementary schools, in the yard. I think that'd be great. I'd be fully supportive of it, 1,000%. Because I like to see these kids get exposure to art. I think your group would be great for that. I mean, you'd be doing something great for the community if you do that.
Just as a note, we do a lot of public art on schools with our art education program, and installing anything above 5 feet on any school ground requires the Department of State Architecture and heavy engineering. So what I'd prefer, Commissioner, is to see the City of West Sacramento create an outdoor gallery that school children can visit.
Right.
It's way easier. That comes from experience.
I used to love field trips.
Yeah, and just, it certainly would be at some point in time a lovely educational venue for your schools, and if it's walkable, you've achieved 2 things.
The Belisara piece in front of the library has become a placemaker, which was its intention.
Absolutely.
I every time I walk by it, I see some kids sitting on that bottom book waiting for their parent to pick them up, So, mission accomplished. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Maybe
I
you
just
can.
want to comment that you're right. You can beautify a place, like what you said in your little presentation. And I think you can do that for West Capitol Avenue. It'd be awesome if you can do that.
Thank you.
And maybe in your rotating art, you can have some guest dangos rolled in.
Those
You never
suckers look
know.
like they'd be pretty hard to move in and out.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? No? Thank you very much,
Thank you all very
for
much.
coming.
Thank you.
Paula,
Very
we
exciting.
miss you.
Yes. This, our public arts policy and fund is a direct result of Paula Wenzel-Belisara's efforts, so thank you.
Okay, now what?
You can come to me.
Anything for our next?
Well,
Inventory.
remember what I said about the last meeting? I'd like to revisit the funds.
Funds? Do you want to, they're not on the agenda. Did we agendize? We got to wait for Bob.
It was requested, and I believe there may be something for the next meeting.
It'll be for the next one.
So we have a public art inventory that's included in this packet. Is that an agenda item, or is that just for our information purposes?
They actually added 2 more pieces that were requested at the last meeting, the stained glass artwork and the reading tree from the library. So it's just to give you an
But they were
update that those
missed
are in
last
there.
time.
Okay. We actually have a public arts piece hanging in the wall of the Chamber of Commerce. It was commissioned by the Turner family in the early 1900s that is maybe as big as this diocese, that was commissioned and hung in the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco, and was hanging around the back of a fire station here for about 10 years, and then in a remodel was positioned there. So it should probably be included.
Is it in the lobby? I haven't been there, unfortunately.
You could call it a lobby, yeah. Actually, we designed the redesign around this piece. It's that huge. Yeah.
Perfect. I will get someone over there.
And we have the receipt and the documents to validate the provenance of the piece. So.
So, future agenda items other than the money deal? Anything else?
I would like to see an update still on the water tank in the park.
Thank you for me not having to say it.
Thank
I
you.
realize something's
Yeah.
going on over there, but I'd like to know just what and how soon and all that.
Absolutely. We'll get
There
staff.
were-
here to talk
Are
about
you
that.
talking about the new water tank? Well, my old topic is the
Oh,
existing
the old
piece
water tank.
and its
Yeah.
maintenance,
Yeah.
because while it's listed in this inventory as, you know, an iconic piece of public art in this community, it's a shame. If that's the case, it's a shame, because it's a faded out mess.
So, the new water tower, the old water tower, the money. Anything else? Are we good?
It seems like at every Arts Commission meeting, we should have a recap, or at least a statement on the Public Art Fund and where it is and what's happened with it. And that should be almost like a treasurer's report, I would think.
I agree.
I agree with that.
Good idea. Any more business?
When is our next meeting scheduled?
I don't have it offhand, but it should be in 3 months. I'll get that to you guys.
September, I heard.
Okay, and then can I call for a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, go ahead. I second it.
Call for, you're making the motion, or are you seconding?
You
the
have
I
motion?
second your motion.
She
I
can't
don't
make
have
a
a
motion.
have
You could
I'm
make a
asking for a
motion.
motion.
Okay, shall we adjourn?
I second that we adjourn.
See you all next time.
Adjourn.